Before the world hears your plans, before people notice your change, before results speak on your behalf, something quiet must happen within you. Rebuilding yourself is not loud. It is not announced. It does not begin with proving anything to anyone. It begins in silence, where excuses have no audience and sincerity has no disguise. It begins when you finally sit with your own heart and admit that what is broken cannot be healed by noise, and what is empty cannot be filled by applause. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength that is still maturing. It is the pause where intention is purified, where motives are stripped of ego, and where the heart is reminded why it exists in the first place. In silence, you stop performing and start becoming. You are no longer distracted by comparisons, no longer drained by explanations, no longer chasing validation that was never meant to sustain you. You begin to rebuild not your image, but your inner foundation. As 2026 approaches, many will rush to set goals, declare transformations, and showcase ambition. But the most powerful renewal will belong to those who rebuild quietly, who heal privately, who grow without announcing every step. Because what is built for people's approval collapses when approval fades. But what is built in sincerity, patience, and reflection stands firm when life tests it. This is an invitation to step away from the noise, not because you are hiding, but because you are prehiring. To embrace silence not as emptiness, but as a sacred workshop where your character is reshaped, your discipline is strengthened, and your purpose is realigned. Rebuild yourself in silence, so that when the time comes to step forward, your presence speaks louder than any words ever could. True transformation begins away from noise, applause, and explanation. It does not announce itself with confidence or arrive dressed in motivation. It does not demand witnesses. In fact, most real change feels uncomfortable because it removes the audience you once depended on. When there is no one clapping, no one watching, no one affirming your struggle, you are left with only yourself and the truth of who you are. That is where rebuilding actually starts. Not when life becomes loud, but when it becomes quiet enough for you to hear your own conscience speak clearly. Noise has a way of distracting us from our deepest work. We stay busy, stay connected, stay visible because silence forces honesty. In silence, you cannot hide behind productivity or public approval. You cannot perform strength. You are confronted with your habits, your intentions, your wounds, and the parts of yourself you kept postponing. This is why so many people fear quiet moments, because noise allows escape, but silence demands presence, and presence requires courage. Applause can be intoxicating. It makes us believe we are growing even when we are only repeating patterns that earn approval. But applause has a cost. It slowly teaches you to measure your worth by reactions, to time your growth around validation, and to shape your journey based on what looks impressive rather than what is necessary. True transformation refuses that bargain. It pulls you away from being seen and asks you to be sincere instead. It asks you to work on what no one will notice, to fix what no one praises, to strengthen what no one celebrates. Rebuilding yourself in silence means choosing integrity over image. It means admitting that some of your struggles cannot be solved publicly, and some of your healing cannot be rushed for the sake of appearing strong. It means allowing yourself to be unfinished without feeling ashamed. In silence, there is no pressure to impress. There is only the responsibility to be honest. Honest about your weaknesses. Honest about your distractions. Honest about the distance between who you are and who you want to become. There is a certain humility that silence teaches. When no one is watching, you realize how much of your effort was fueled by being noticed. You begin to ask different questions. Not, how do I look? But, why am I doing this? Not, who will see my progress? But, is this progress even real? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary, because a life rebuilt on sincerity does not collapse when recognition disappears. Silence also reveals intention. When you remove the audience, what remains is motive. Are you changing to grow, or changing to be praised? Are you improving because your heart demands it, or because your reputation depends on it? In the quiet, these answers become impossible to avoid. And once intention is clear, direction becomes clearer too. You stop chasing everything and start committing to what truly matters. Transformation in silence is slow, and that slowness is not a flaw. It allows roots to grow deep. Fast change often looks impressive, but it is fragile. Slow change reshapes character. It rewires discipline. It trains patience. When you rebuild quietly, you are not just adjusting behavior, you are reshaping identity. You are learning how to show up consistently, even when there is no reward waiting at the end of the day. There is also a spiritual depth to silent rebuilding. Away from noise, the heart softens. Reflection becomes easier. You notice how easily distractions steal your focus, and how often your soul has been neglected. Silence becomes a mirror, showing you where you have been neglectful, where you have been sincere, and where you need to realign. It is not a space of punishment, but of clarity. When you stop explaining yourself, you save energy. When you stop announcing your plans, you protect them. Silence guards growth. Not everyone needs to understand your journey, and not every season is meant to be shared. Some phases are meant to be lived privately, strengthened quietly, and revealed only through outcomes, not words. Rebuilding yourself away from noise does not mean withdrawing from life forever. It means stepping back long enough to rebuild correctly. It means choosing substance over show, depth over display, and truth over trends. In that quiet work, discipline is formed, sincerity is tested, and resilience is strengthened in moments that feel ordinary, unseen, and deeply personal. Where no one knows how hard you are trying, where no one applauds your restraint, where no one notices the battles you are winning within yourself. And yet you continue, day after day, refining your intentions, correcting your direction, learning to stand first. Silence is not empty, and it is not passive. Silence is a space, and what you bring into that space determines what it gives back to you. When life becomes quiet, intention rises to the surface, without conversations to hide behind and distractions to numb awareness. The heart begins to reveal what truly drives it. In silence, intentions that were once blurred by busyness become sharp and undeniable. You begin to see the difference between what you claim to want and what you are actually willing to work for. Much of what we call intention is often mixed with ego, fear, and habit. We tell ourselves we want growth, peace, discipline, or closeness to purpose. but our actions quietly confess otherwise. Noise allows that contradiction to continue. Silence does not. When the world quiets down, the heart speaks louder, and it speaks honestly. You start to notice where your effort fades, where your consistency weakens, and where your sincerity was conditional. This awareness is uncomfortable, but it is also cleansing. Silence strips away performance. There is no one to impress, no one to convince, no image to protect. What remains is motive. Why are you doing what you are doing? Who are you doing it for? Would you still continue if no one ever acknowledged it? These questions feel heavy because they expose the fragile areas of intention. Yet this exposure is necessary. Purification does not happen through denial. It happens through recognition. In a sacred silence, intention is refined through repetition and restraint. You learn to act without announcing, to commit without broadcasting, to struggle without seeking sympathy. This changes the quality of your effort. Actions become quieter but deeper. You stop rushing for visible results and start focusing on internal alignment. You learn that sincerity is not proven by intensity, but by consistency when no one is watching. Silence also teaches patience, because intention cannot be rushed. When you remove external pressure, you allow intention to mature naturally. You stop forcing outcomes and start trusting process. This patience reshapes how you approach growth. You become less reactive and more intentional, less driven by emotion and more anchored in purpose. Silence slows you down just enough to notice where you were acting out of impulse rather than clarity. There is a certain discipline that grows only in quiet spaces. It is the discipline of showing up for yourself without applause, of choosing what is right over what is easy, of continuing even when motivation fades. Silence reveals whether your intention is rooted in conviction or convenience. And over time, this discipline strengthens resolve, making intention steadier and less dependent on mood or circumstance. In silence, you also confront the gap between intention and behavior. You notice how easily words promise what actions delay. This realization can be humbling, but it is also empowering. Because once you see the gap clearly, you can begin to close it intentionally. Not through dramatic change, but through small, repeated choices that slowly align who you are with who you want to become. A sacred silence also reconnects you with meaning. Away from constant stimulation, the heart remembers what truly matters. Goals that once felt urgent may lose importance, while neglected priorities regain weight. You begin to reassess what deserves your energy. Silence helps you recognize which intentions were inherited from pressure, comparison, or expectation, and which ones genuinely belong to you. Purified intention is quieter, calmer, and more focused. It does not need to argue or justify itself. It does not panic when unseen. It moves steadily, guided by clarity rather than validation. Silence trains you to listen before acting, to reflect before reacting, and to choose depth over display. It teaches you that intention is not something you declare once, but something you renew daily through choices that may seem small, but carry lasting impact. As silence becomes familiar, you grow more comfortable with your own company. This comfort allows honesty without self-condemnation. You stop being harsh with yourself and start being truthful. You recognize that intention is not about perfection, but about direction. about returning again and again to what matters, even after distraction, even after weakness, even after delay. In this quiet work, the heart softens and sharpens at the same time. Softens toward humility and accountability, sharpens toward clarity and resolve. Silence becomes less about withdrawal and more about alignment. A place where intention is cleansed of noise, ego, and fear, shaped patiently through awareness, discipline, and sincerity, strengthened in moments no one else sees, carried forward not by excitement but by quiet conviction that continues to guide choices long after the silence itself has passed. Without needing to be witnessed, you're allowing the change to settle deeply into who you are becoming. True change does not announce itself. It does not arrive with applause, captions, or witnesses. It begins in silence, in the quiet corners of the heart, where no one is watching except Allah. It begins when a person becomes honest enough to admit, something within me needs to be rebuilt, and humble enough to do that work without seeking recognition from the world. We live in a time where everything is loud. Our successes are posted, our struggles are broadcast, and even our healing is expected to be visible. But the most powerful transformations in the history of faith never began in noise. They began in seclusion, in tears whispered into sujood, in dua that no one heard, and in decisions made between a servant and their Lord. What Allah builds in silence, He strengthens in ways the world cannot shake. Rebuilding yourself in silence is not about isolation from people. It is about reconnection with purpose. It is about stepping away from constant comparison and returning to sincerity. It is about asking yourself who you are when no one is clapping, when no one is affirming you, when the only voice you hear is your conscience, and the only audience you seek is Allah. That is where real clarity is born. Silence strips away pretenses. It exposes intentions. In silence, excuses fade and truths rise. You begin to notice what drains your heart, what weakens your faith, and what pulls you away from who you are meant to be. And instead of performing growth for others, you begin the slow, sacred work of repairing your relationship with Allah, one prayer at a time, one habit at a time, one sincere repentance at a time. As we enter 2026, many will rush to announce goals, resolutions, and dreams. But some will choose a different path. They will choose to rebuild quietly. They will choose discipline over display, consistency over attention, and sincerity over validation. They will let Allah shape them away from the noise, so that when the time comes, what emerges is not fragile, not performative, but deeply rooted and unshakable. This is an invitation to pause before you post, to reflect before you react, and to realign before you run. An invitation to trust that the work done in silence is never wasted. Because when Allah sees your effort in private, He places light in your heart, strength in your steps, and purpose in your journey. And what is rebuilt with Him does not need to be explained to anyone else. Expand this keynote 1 into 800 words. Don't add any headings and any conclusion in last of keynote, and all speech must be like humans writing. True transformation begins in private, unseen moments with Allah, not when life is comfortable or when everything is going well, but often when the heart feels heavy and confused and tired of pretending it is fine. It begins when a person finally slows down enough to listen to what their soul has been whispering for a long time. In those moments when no one is watching, no one is applauding, and no one is asking questions, the heart speaks honestly. That honesty is the doorway to real change. Many people want visible results without invisible effort, but Allah's way has always been the opposite. What grows strong on the outside must first be nurtured quietly on the inside. In private moments, a person is stripped of their image. There is no audience to impress, no label to protect, no role to perform. It is just you and Allah, exactly as you are. Your fears, your regrets, your unanswered questions, your hidden hopes. These moments are uncomfortable, but they are sacred, because in them, Allah invites you to return to yourself and, more importantly, to return to Him. When you sit alone with your prayer, when you whisper a dua you have never said out loud, when tears fall without explanation, something begins to shift. Not dramatically, not instantly, but deeply. True transformation does not begin with fixing habits, it begins with fixing intentions. In silence, intentions become clear. You begin to see why you do what you do. You begin to recognize which actions were driven by sincerity and which were driven by approval. You notice how often you chased validation instead of closeness to Allah. And this realization does not come to shame you, it comes to free you. Because once you see the truth, you are no longer trapped by it. You can begin again quietly with purpose. Private moments with Allah teach you patience. They teach you that growth is not rushed and healing is not linear. You may pray for strength and still feel weak. You may ask for guidance and still feel unsure. But something is happening beneath the surface. Roots are forming. Faith is deepening. Reliance is being rebuilt. Allah does not always change your situation immediately. Sometimes He changes how you carry it. And that inner change is far more powerful than any external shift. In these unseen moments, discipline is born. Not the kind of discipline that seeks praise, but the kind that holds steady even when no one notices. You wake up for prayer when it would be easier to sleep. You hold your tongue when you could have spoken. You walk away from what harms your heart, even when it costs you comfort. No one may know, but Allah knows, and that knowledge becomes enough. Slowly, your relationship with obedience changes. It is no longer about obligation alone. It becomes an act of love, trust, and surrender. Silence with Allah also teaches you how to let go. You begin to release grudges you carried too long, expectations that drained you, and versions of yourself that no longer serve your akira. You realize that not everything needs to be explained, and not every wound needs to be displayed. Some things heal better when they are protected. Some transformations lose their strength when exposed too early. Allah knows what needs to be hidden and what needs to be revealed, and trusting that wisdom brings peace. As you spend time rebuilding in private, your perspective changes. You stop measuring success by how fast things change and start measuring it by how sincere your heart becomes. You notice that your prayers feel different. Your reactions soften. Your priorities shift. The noise of the world begins to lose its grip on you. You are less reactive, less desperate, less dependent on outcomes. You begin to understand that Allah was never rushing you, He was preparing you. Unseen moments with Allah also prepare you for public moments. When trials come, you are steadier. When blessings arrive, you are humbler. When recognition appears, it does not define you, because your foundation was not built on attention, but on faith. You know where your strength comes from, and you know where to return when you feel lost. That confidence is quiet, but it is powerful. This is why true transformation cannot be loud at the beginning. Loud beginnings often lead to fragile endings, but quiet beginnings rooted in sincerity lead to endurance. What Allah shapes in the hidden parts of your life carries a weight and depth that cannot be shaken by criticism or praise. And the person you become through those private moments may not look impressive to the world at first, but they will be deeply aligned with who Allah created you to be. Expand this keynote 2 into 800 words. Don't add any sub-headings and any conclusion in last of keynote, and all speech must be like humans writing. Silence is often misunderstood as emptiness, but in reality it is a sacred space where the heart finally has room to breathe. It is in silence that sincerity is tested and revealed, because without noise there is nothing to hide behind. When distractions fade, the soul comes forward with its wounds, its fatigue, and its longing to be whole again. Healing does not begin when life becomes quieter on its own. It begins when a person intentionally chooses silence and allows Allah to meet them there. In silence, the heart begins to speak honestly. There is no pressure to sound strong, to appear patient, or to perform gratitude. You can admit what hurts, what confuses you, and what feels broken. Many people avoid silence because they are afraid of what they might feel. But sincerity requires courage. When you sit with your pain instead of escaping it, you invite Allah into places you may have kept closed for years. And Allah does not enter to expose you, but to heal you gently, layer by layer. Healing in silence is not dramatic. It does not always feel like relief. Sometimes it feels like discomfort, like confronting truths you postponed. You begin to notice patterns that harmed you, attachments that weakened you, and expectations that exhausted you. Silence makes you aware of how much noise you used to numb your heart. But awareness is mercy. Once you see clearly, you can begin to realign your life in a way that honors your soul and your faith. Sincerity grows in silence, because there is no audience to reward you. When you pray alone, when you give quietly, when you hold on to patience without recognition, your intentions are purified. You stop doing things to be seen and start doing them because they are right. This is where faith becomes intimate. Your relationship with Allah shifts from something public to something personal. You learn to speak to Him not in rehearsed words, but in raw, honest conversation. Silence also teaches restraint. You learn that not every thought needs to be spoken, and not every emotion needs to be shared. Some feelings are meant to be processed privately, not performed publicly. When you hold your tongue, you protect your heart. When you step back instead of reacting, you create space for wisdom. Healing often requires distance from the very environments that caused the wounds, and silence becomes a shield rather than a weakness. In this quiet space, the heart realigns with its true priorities. You begin to recognize what truly matters, and what only demanded your attention. You see how easily the heart becomes attached to approval, outcomes, and control. Silence gently loosens those attachments. You start trusting Allah with what you once tried to manage alone. This trust does not come from answers. It comes from surrender, and surrender brings a kind of peace that noise never could. Silence allows emotions to settle. When the heart is no longer overstimulated, it becomes softer, more receptive. You begin to feel compassion for yourself and for others. You understand that healing does not mean erasing the past, but learning how to carry it without letting it define you. In these moments, Allah places sakina in the heart, a calm that does not depend on circumstances but on connection. As sincerity deepens, the need for validation fades. You are no longer desperate for people to understand you, because Allah already does. You become comfortable being unseen, knowing that what is nurtured in silence will bear fruit in time. This comfort is not detachment from the world, but balance within it. You engage without being consumed. You give without being drained, and you love without losing yourself. Rebuilding in silence reshapes how you respond to life. You become less reactive and more reflective. You pause before speaking, pray before deciding, and trust before fearing. The heart, once scattered, begins to feel whole again, not because everything is resolved, but because everything is placed back where it belongs, under the care of Allah. Expand this keynote 3 into 800 words. Don't add any subheadings and any conclusion in last of keynote, and all speech must be like humans wishing. Before anything in life truly changes, the intention behind it must be purified. Many people rush to fix what is visible while neglecting what is hidden, not realizing that outcomes are only reflections of intentions that came before them. Rebuilding intentions is quiet work. It happens when a person pauses long enough to ask themselves why they want what they want, and who they are seeking approval from. In that pause, the heart begins to realign, and that realignment changes everything that follows. Intentions are subtle, and that is why they require silence to be examined. When life is noisy, it is easy to confuse ambition with purpose and productivity with sincerity. Silence removes the pressure to perform and allows the heart to be honest. You begin to see how often your actions were shaped by fear of loss, desire for praise, or comparison with others. This awareness can be uncomfortable, but it is also freeing. Allah does not demand perfection, He asks for truth. And truth begins when you admit what has been driving you. Rebuilding intentions means returning every goal, every effort, and every dream back to Allah. It means asking yourself whether what you are chasing brings you closer to Him, or simply makes you look successful in the eyes of people. Sometimes the intention needs to be corrected, and sometimes it needs to be completely released. Not everything you desire is meant to stay with you, and not every path that looks good is good for your soul. Silence gives you the clarity to distinguish between what feeds your ego and what nourishes your faith. When intentions are realigned, patience becomes easier. You stop rushing outcomes because you trust the process. You understand that Allah's timing is not delayed, it is deliberate. Rebuilding intentions teaches you to work without being obsessed with results. You do what you can with sincerity and leave what you cannot control in Allah's hands. This shift removes a heavy burden from the heart, the burden of constantly measuring yourself by visible success. Intention also shapes how you handle hardship. When your intention is rooted in seeking Allah's pleasure, Difficulties no longer feel like punishment. They feel like part of the journey. You may still struggle, but you struggle with meaning. You learn to ask not only for ease, but for growth, wisdom, and nearness to Allah through whatever you are facing. This changes the way you endure. Pain becomes purposeful, and waiting becomes worship. Rebuilding intentions also transforms worship itself. Acts that once felt heavy begin to feel intimate. Prayer is no longer something you rush through, but something you return to. Giving becomes an expression of trust rather than loss. Obedience stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like protection. This transformation does not come from doing more. It comes from doing things with a heart that knows why it is doing them. When intentions are aligned, consistency becomes natural. You are no longer fueled by motivation, which comes and goes, but by conviction, which remains. Even on days when energy is low, your intention carries you forward. You may move slowly, but you do not abandon the path. This quiet consistency builds a strength that is not easily shaken by setbacks or criticism. Rebuilding intentions also softens how you see others. You become less competitive and more compassionate. When you are no longer chasing validation, you stop resenting the success of others. You understand that everyone is on their own journey with Allah, and comparison loses its grip on your heart. This inner peace is one of the greatest outcomes of sincere intention, even though it is rarely noticed from the outside. As intentions are refined, outcomes begin to change naturally, not always in the way you expected, but in the way that is best for you. Some doors open gently, others close firmly, and both feel like mercy. You begin to trust that Allah is arranging your life with wisdom you may not fully see yet, and that trust allows you to move forward without anxiety, anchored in the knowledge that what is meant for you will not miss you, and what misses you was never meant to stay. Letting go of the need to be seen, praised, or validated is one of the most difficult forms of inner work, because it requires unlearning habits that once helped you survive. Many people did not seek validation out of vanity, but out of a quiet fear of being overlooked, unappreciated, or forgotten. Over time, that fear becomes a voice that constantly asks, "Does this matter? Do I matter? Will anyone notice?" Rebuilding yourself means learning how to live without feeding that voice, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels lonely. The desire to be seen can slowly turn growth into performance. You begin to measure your progress by reactions instead of transformation. You choose what looks impressive rather than what is necessary. You share too early, explain too much, and adjust your path based on feedback that was never meant to guide your journey. Letting go of validation does not mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop letting their approval define your direction. When you no longer need to be praised, your effort becomes more honest. You stop rushing milestones just to prove something. You stop abandoning what is important simply because it is not visible. This shift is subtle but powerful. It allows you to work on the quiet parts of yourself, the habits no one sees, the discipline no one rewards, the restraint no one applauds. These are the areas where real character is built. There is a certain freedom that comes when you stop explaining yourself. Explanation often comes from a place of insecurity, a desire to be understood so that you feel justified. But clarity does not require permission, and purpose does not require approval. When you trust your values, you no longer feel the urge to defend every choice. You allow your actions, over time, to speak for themselves. Validation can become a dependency. The more you seek it, the more you need it. And when it disappears, motivation collapses. Letting go breaks that cycle. It teaches you how to self-regulate, how to continue even when encouragement is absent. This independence strengthens emotional resilience. You learn that your worth is not measured by attention, and your sincerity is not proven by recognition. In the absence of praise, intention becomes clearer. You start asking deeper questions. Would I still do this if no one noticed? Would I still choose this path if it remained private forever? These questions refine commitment. They separate what is meaningful from what is performative. What remains is quieter but stronger, less dramatic but more sustainable. Letting go of being seen also protects your growth. Not everyone deserves access to your process. Some people misunderstand what they cannot control. Others project their own limitations onto your effort. By keeping parts of your journey private, you reduce interference. You give yourself the space to make mistakes, to change direction, to grow without pressure. Privacy becomes a form of self-respect. This detachment does not happen overnight. The urge to be acknowledged returns in moments of exhaustion, doubt, or insecurity. There will be days when silence feels heavy and invisibility feels unfair. In those moments, discipline replaces motivation. You remind yourself why you started. You anchor yourself in values instead of reactions. Over time, the craving for validation weakens, replaced by a steadier sense of inner approval. There is a deep maturity in choosing substance over applause. Applause is loud but brief. Substance is quiet but lasting. When you prioritize who you are becoming over how you are perceived, your energy shifts. You invest in growth that does not need an audience. You build confidence that does not collapse when opinions change. Letting go of validation also deepens sincerity in relationships. When you are no longer performing, connections become more authentic. You show up as you are, not as who you think will be accepted. This honesty attracts fewer, but more meaningful bonds. You learn that being understood by everyone is not the goal, being true is. As this inner detachment grows, you begin to experience a different kind of peace. A peace that does not rise and fall with attention. A peace rooted in alignment. You no longer feel the need to rush outcomes to prove your worth. You allow growth to take its time. You accept that some seasons are meant to be unseen, and that invisibility can be a gift rather than a punishment. In choosing not to be seen, praised, or validated, you reclaim ownership of your journey. You move with quiet confidence, guided by values instead of visibility, sustained by conviction instead of applause, continuing forward even when no one notices, even when no one affirms, even when the work feels heavy and solitary, trusting that what is being built within you is far more important than what anyone else is allowed to witness.